let's start off here. Page 183, Exploring Psychology. And we're going to talk a little bit about consciousness today and different examples of selective attention. All right, so exploring psych, losing sleep. Who'd like to read that here? Let's start it off. You guys have it up? No. It's a little glitchy for me. There you go. We have it. Yeah. Okay. Allison, you want to read that for us? Losing sleep?
In 1959, New Yorkers Job and Peter Tripp stayed awake for 200 hours to raise money for charity. After about 50 hours, he started having mild hallucinations, seeing cobwebs in his shoes when there were none, and there was thinking that specks of dirt were bugs. By 100 hours, he became delirious and saw the doctors tweeted, "Sue, as I tangle up the rainbow." At 120, he needed a stimulant to keep him awake. After 150 hours, he was disoriented, not knowing who or where he was, and he became paranoid. He backed against the wall, letting no one pass him. By 200 hours, his hallucinations had taken a sinister turn, and he had thought a doctor was trying to examine him. Was an undertaker trying to come.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So we'll talk about how sleep is really, really important. Obviously, with a lack of sleep, with sleep deprivation, there could be a lot of issues that could arise with loss of appetite, any underlying problems. And here with hallucinations, holy cow, this guy went through a lot of problems. I don't know if I would have stayed up that long for a charity event. I mean, yeah, you want to try to do your best for those types of things, but to stay up for 200 hours, oh my gosh, that's a lot. So he obviously faced a lot of problems, and without sleep, this could cause many issues, underlying issues, and we'll mention in this chapter about how important sleep is. And with the assignment, it's just a dream journal. Okay, so for the week that we have left, you're just going to record your dreams, which we'll talk about here towards the end of class. And it's just 3 dreams. I mean, it might be a little tough to do that. Maybe some of you don't remember your dreams in the morning. I know for me that happens a lot, but I'll talk about that assignment here soon enough. Just make sure, obviously let's keep it G rated. I don't want to hear about anybody's dreams that maybe get a little weird. Anyway, I'd like you guys to read this here then. So this paragraph here, and why do we sleep? Okay, that's all I want you to read. So you're just going to read about consciousness here as we're getting involved in this chapter. All right, so when you're done with that short reading, here's a bell ringer for today. So explain what consciousness is. What does it mean to have an altered state of consciousness? Man, the bird calendar's coming down. Need to get a new one. All right, so explain what consciousness is. What do we got? What do we have? And what does it mean to have an altered state of consciousness? What do we got? Brittany, what do you have? Yeah, so our current state, right? So how alert we are at the current time, at a given time. Yeah, good job. And with sensation, we talked about how sensation plays a huge factor in that. And with our perception of these forms of stimulus, that's what we talked about last chapter. And where in the brain is that occurring? Where is that being focused, right? And with last chapter, the chapter before, it all kind of works in a timeline effect, right? And that's why we talked about the brain, its functions in chapter 3. And that's why we talked about sensation, perception in chapter 4. And now how we're putting it all together and how we're perceiving these sort of forms of stimulus all at once and how we can make sense of the outside world. And our consciousness, that's just what we are at the current time and what we're perceiving all at once. And consciousness is like this point where all this stimulus is occurring and what we're understanding and what we're perceiving in our brain at one given time. It's all occurring at this given moment. And what does it mean by altered states of consciousness? What does that mean? What does that mean? Allison, what do you have?
A change in one's mental state, and the person is not.
Okay. All right. Good. Good. So I don't know if you guys remember chapter 1 with Freud. You guys remember talking about the iceberg method? Yeah, with the preconscious mind, the unconscious, and how the unconscious we really can't tap into. Yeah, we know it's there. Okay, this is our hidden and our desires, our motives. But at the same point, if we can tap into the unconscious mind, maybe we can parallel process. Maybe we can multitask. Right? With the conscious mind, it's very difficult to do that. Yeah, we can say we can kind of do it in a way with when we're walking, chewing gum, or if we're talking and walking at the same time, but it's very difficult to focus on one certain movement or one certain thought at one point. Okay. And with parallel processing, we'll talk about it today, it's very difficult to do. And many psychologists are still trying to tap into that unconscious mind and understand it. But what's difficult in doing that? What's the problem or the issue when it comes to understanding the unconscious mind or the preconscious mind or the conscious mind? Is there any way to really study it? Is there? Not really. Not really. Many psychologists try to. And referring back to chapter 1, you guys remember structuralism with the structures of the mind? Yeah. And how introspection was used to try to understand the mind a little bit more in detail. What is introspection? What does that mean? You guys remember that? I know we're referring back to chapter 1. What is introspection? Allie, go ahead. Yeah, good job. It's really just understanding our conscious mind at a given point. So we're asking questions. It's like, oh, well, how are you feeling? What do you hear when, or what do you think of when you hear this sound or this music or this song, right? Or what do you feel when you are seeing or given this picture, right? What are you perceiving at the point? That's great. That is a great way to understand what people are thinking of at the time, at the given point, and to understand the conscious mind. But what's the problem with it? What's a drawback to the introspection and the structuralist approach? Is all the information the same? No. Every person that you maybe asked a question for about a certain song or let's say a picture, their viewpoint's going to be totally different. Their perspective is going to be altered. So is there any way to really have a ground, a principle that we can relate back to when understanding the unconscious mind? No, it's very difficult to do. Right? Yeah, with technology, which we already talked about, with different forms of scanning the brain, there is ways that we can understand the mind a little bit more in detail. There's ways we can understand how our consciousness works, especially with MRIs, fMRIs, and obviously these different scans that understand the brain and its workings, and we can see exactly where that's being focused in the brain, what lobe, right? That obviously is very beneficial. And with your reading today, the EEG, okay, like I said, it's kind of like a seismograph, right? And with the EEG, that's a way of understanding brain activity. And through this unconscious state, which people think when you're dreaming, in all reality, you're really not. You're so conscious at that point, your brain is still working. And this might be just past memories, emotions that we're feeling, let's say throughout our day, through our experience, that we're just reflecting back to, right? Obviously, some of it may be being made up. And that's why it's important to understand the dream state and with the unconscious mind, which we'll get to here soon. All right, so terms for today. We got consciousness, we have parallel processing, selective attention, and the cocktail party effect. I forgot to have the sensation box. Last chapter was sensation and perception. I usually have an activity where people create these boxes and have these items inside the box, and you have to guess exactly what the person put inside. I didn't get to do that with you guys. I apologize. It's a fun activity. Oh well. Sorry, Kiara. You see the new Spider-Man? The Dream Journal.
Yeah, can you do that other activity instead?
Doesn't really, I mean, it kind of relates in a way. Yeah, with consciousness, right? I don't know. All right, what do we got? Consciousness. All right, we already talked about that. So let's just move past it. So this is just really our working mind at the moment, at the time. Okay. If you had to label it in Freud's point of view, his perspective, his thoughts, it would be what? The ID, superego, or ego? The id, right? The id, ego, or superego? What do you think? What was the conscious mind related to? You guys remember? So this is outside the water, right? Go ahead, Kiara. This is above the water. This is something that we express, we show. This is our ego. Yep, good job. Good work. All right, parallel processing. What does that mean? What does parallel processing mean? Raven, what do you have?
The ability of the brain to simultaneously process incoming stimuli.
Yeah, good job. Good job. So this is really multitasking. Okay. So this is the brain's ability to receive this incoming information, this stimulus, and process it all at once. Right? And good example is if, let's say, you go into a restaurant, you smell the aroma, you see what kind of obviously items that are being placed on the table, you taste it. There's all this sensation coming all at once that we're making and understanding. We're perceiving it in our mind. What we're eating, what we're getting involved in. Okay, there's so much going on, so much stimulus that our mind's trying to perceive it. So parallel processing, this is our brain's ability to multitask. Selective attention. Caitlin, what do you have for selective attention? Yeah, yeah, good job, good job. So this is our ability to try to select our attention to one thing, right? One stimulus, let's say one uh, point of view, our conscious mind. Okay, yeah, we hear the air conditioner going, we hear that humming. But until I said that, many of you maybe not have perceived it, right? Many of you maybe not have sensed or understood that that was running, or you can hear it. All right, this is our ability to try to focus in on a certain stimulus. Okay, when we're driving, especially, this happens all at once. There's so many lights flashing. Let's say a stop sign coming up. There's might be people walking along the sidewalk. Okay, there's a car in front of us, where we're going to turn. There's so much information going all at once that our mind's just trying to select our attention towards one goal. All right, cocktail party effect. What do we have? Hadley, what do you have? Yeah, yeah, good job. Good job. So this happens often. Maybe you're at a party, like, right? Let's say you're at an event where there's many people having conversations around you. And this is your ability to try to focus in on one person, let's say, communicating with you, that is talking with you. Maybe it's happening at a, let's say, a sporting event. Maybe you're obviously focusing on the activity at hand, whether it's receiving calls or information, or let's say signals from someone on the court or out in the football field, whatever, and you're blocking out all the stimulus occurring around you that's happening in the stands, that is happening, let's say, uh, in a close proximity. Cocktail party effects, just really focusing our selective attention on one given thing. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So notes for today. Let's get into it. All right. So consciousness, the process underlying the mental model, we create the world of which we are aware. So how our brains alert at the given time, how we're aware at the given moment. And I know we talked about in chapter 1 with Freud. So the ego. So what is above the water? What is being? What is prevalent? What is occurring? And that we're alert and awake and understanding of at the given time period. Yeah, the pre-conscious mind is there where we can retrieve this information and revert back to memories and certain experiences from a previous time and relate it to what we're experiencing at the given time. Then we have the unconscious mind. What's occurring underneath the water, right? What are these hidden motives, these desires, these, I guess you could say, these feelings that we might have that we try to hide deep underneath the water. And many people say the unconscious mind has the ability to multitask and parallel process what we can't really do with our conscious mind. That's why many psychologists are trying to figure out how we tap into the mind a little bit more to understand it, to see the workings of the mind and and see our advancements. All right, so what role does consciousness play in who we are? What role is it? Raven, what do you think? What role does consciousness play in who we are? Maybe we can relate it to, like, let's say, a social construct. So like what we are experiencing, who we are around, our peers, right? Maybe the forms of entertainment we are associated with. Maybe it's family values, traditions, maybe a social construct, something that you can relate it to, right? What were you thinking of for this question? No? Okay, Hadley, go ahead. All right, yeah, yeah. So, like I was saying before, the social construct, that's a good example. It's like, well, what type of clothes do we wear? What type of music do we listen to? What type of extracurricular activities do we get involved in? What type of music do we listen to? You name it, right? There's so many different examples that we can lean on at our conscious mind that we're thinking of at the moment or presenting to other people that displays who we are. Does that make sense? Right. That's kind of more of like a sociological perspective, but that's a good example anyway. Caitlin, what do you think? Yeah. All right. Good. Good. All right. So with consciousness, process underlying a mental model we create, it's also the part of the mind from which we potentially retrieve the fact, an idea, an emotion, or a memory that combine with critical thinking. So with pre-conscious mind, this is what exactly Freud was saying. Our pre-conscious mind is what we can retrieve at a given point, at a given time. It's not something that we're thinking of at right at the moment, but it's information we can regurgitate, that we can explain, even though it might not be what we're thinking of at the moment. Right. So we're talking about, let's say, the conscious mind right now in psychology class. Christian, what happened yesterday with Antonio Brown? Yeah. Okay. So was that something you're thinking of at the moment until I asked you? No. Okay. But anyway, with the pre-conscious mind, that's something we can retrieve. That information we can explain at a given point, and it's something that we might not be thinking of at the moment in our conscious mind. It's stored memory. It's stored experience, right? And again, a lot of people try to understand the mind, and these psychologists of really how we try to fit the mind into our behavior, and it's really tough to do. How do we explain it, right? How do you explain the pre-conscious mind? Where are these memories and emotions located? Where are they stored? Well, we know with memories, it's the hippocampus, right? Emotions, we know with the amygdala, with that limbic system. It's very difficult to explain these types of these thoughts, right? And there's many other examples you can come up with the pre-conscious mind, right? And how that is something that is there, but how do you explain it? It's very difficult. And that's the challenge, right? That's the big challenge. How do we understand this, right? How can we focus and figure out exactly where we can prove the conscious mind is a belief, is a thing? Well, we know with technology today, that's a great example of where to see where these thoughts, these experiences are located within the brain, right? It's something that obviously is very beneficial. Back in the 1950s, there wasn't the ability to have this technology to see within the brain and see exactly where this perception of the outside world is occurring, right? It's very difficult to explain, right? So looking back to chapter 1, many psychologists before really the advancements in technology to see within the brain and see exactly where this is being focused and understood, they had to come up with perspectives. And we already talked about structuralism already, and how this is understanding the structures of the mind, how to establish the principles that we try to relate the conscious mind to. So with introspection, right, constantly asking questions, that's a great way to understand the conscious mind and what we're thinking of at the given moment, at the given time. But at the same point, right, there's so many perspectives. Everybody has a different point of view. Everybody has a different explanation of the outside world. Behaviorists like John Watson sought the mind of psychology to take it out. Let's just worry about reactions. Let's just worry about how people react to certain stimulus, and how the body makes up more of an explanation of the conscious mind than actually the brain does. Obviously, you just can't do that. You just can't forget about the mind. You can't forget about the brain. when understanding reactions and certain behaviors of people. But because of the lack of technology, because of the lack of understanding of the mind in the 1950s, even before, these perspectives were presented. And there's a lot of backing to it. You can look at these perspectives and think, yeah, I can see where they're coming from. But there's also drawbacks to it, right? There's obviously drawbacks to it. So what brings the mind a little bit more? It brings out the mind and to be focused on understanding it more. Well, there's many different things. Obviously with memory, you can talk about illusions. And through the 1960s, through the 1970s, there's drug-induced states, right? How our consciousness could be altered depending on what type of, let's say, drugs or hallucinogens or different types of states our mind could encounter that we haven't really seen before or that we haven't really encountered or studied. So this is a good example of why the mind is brought back to psychology, why we need to study it a little bit more in detail, and especially with impacts, right? How impacts and how accidents could alter our brain and alter our conscious ability and really the person we are. So again, technology is something obviously that is being more of a use to benefit the understandings of the mind and how we react. And with different scans and like we mentioned last chapter with the MRI, the fMRI, and really just focusing in on the brain and see where this activity is occurring in different lobes, this creates a better image of understanding where this type of interaction, this type of perception occurs. So the mind's getting brought back in because of technology, because of advancements in scanning, okay, and understanding where this stimulus is occurring, this perception is occurring. So multitasking, I talked a little bit about that with vocab and how multitasking is our ability to really our brains making all these perceptions all at once, okay, with whatever stimulus presented to us. And driving is a good example, right? I'm sure when we're driving, we hear the music playing, okay, we might get a text from someone. Well, what is your first reaction? Pick up your phone and text and drive. Shouldn't do it, but many people do. Right? To say that I don't, well, I do every now and then. I shouldn't say I do, but it is what it is. It's a habit. Apple CarPlay helps out a lot, though. Comes up on the screen. I'm like, oh, well, I can just click on it and just says it over the speaker. So that helps, but it's still taking my attention away from the road. Kiara, you don't text and drive? You better not. You better not. Maybe eating or drinking while you're driving. Again, multitasking is something that we try to accomplish, but it's very difficult to do. Once we start partaking in another task, well, that's shifting our conscious mind. That's shifting our selective attention from the road. And it could just be as small as looking at something on the side of the road. I know whenever I pass like cows or something, I always honk the horn. I always look at them like, see how they react to the horn being blasted at them. And it takes my eyes off the road and something I shouldn't do, but I think it's funny. All right, so an unconscious mind, parallel processing is just that ability to multitask and how our brain's perceiving all this information all at once, and we're trying to make sense of it. Okay, and many people, like I said, try to relate this parallel processing to the unconscious mind, right? And that's kind of how we kind of put things to the back of our brain, right? As we're receiving all the stimulus at once. Right? Our conscious mind can't focus on the music being played, us driving, us seeing a text message from our friends, us eating or drinking while we're driving. It just can't happen. We have to put one to the back of our mind, and our selective attention is focused on one certain thing at one time. Okay, we don't have the ability to do that all at once. We might think we do, but in all reality, there's no way we can just focus our selective attention on all these forms of stimulus coming into our brains. There's just no way. There's no ability to do that. But like I mentioned with Freud, his ideology, his perspective of the unconscious mind is how do we tap into it? How do we break into this mind where we can multitask, where we can parallel process, where we can bring these hidden drives and attention-seeking principles to the forefront of our mind, so that we can focus on all these perceptions all at once. All right, so our conscious mind has three main functions. Number one, restricts our attention. So selective attention, number one. Okay, we kind of talked about that with the vocab. So how we can focus our attention on one given thing. Cocktail party effect. So going along with the selective attention is if we're in a crowded room, how we focus on, let's say, one conversation or one certain stimulus, and that we can block out all the other stimulus that's occurring around us. Okay, the conversations that are occurring around us, we can block out the focus on one person that's talking to us directly, or if we're trying to eavesdrop on someone. Uh-oh. All right, the meeting place. So the conscious mind is the meeting place where all these forms of stimulus are occurring around us. So we're all visualizing something. We're all hearing something. We're all feeling something. Right? Maybe, like I said, we're at a restaurant, we're tasting, we're eating, let's say pizza, we're smelling it all at once. We hear the conversations around us at other tables. Okay, we visualize and see our food. Okay, this consciousness is our meeting places of all our perceptions. Okay, all the stimulants occurring all around us. And finally, number three, allows us to create a mental model of the world that we can manipulate. So how we can understand what we're sensing all at once. Okay, what we're perceiving all at once, and really just taking it in. And our conscious mind is doing that all simultaneously. Like I mentioned, a restaurant is a great example of how we're bringing in all the stimulus and associating it with our meal. Okay, we're smelling it, tasting it, and obviously we're picking up our meal to eat it, and we're making connections to it, to a past experience of what we ate. There's so much stimulus occurring all at once that we're making a mental model of it. All right, is there any questions of that, guys? Good with consciousness? Okay, there you go. See you guys later. Have a good one.